Hi, good morning, everyone, and welcome to the Houston-Galveston Area Council's Bringing Back Main Street Roundtable. We've come from all around the region and across the state to visit Wharton County today. I'm Andrea Tantillo with the Houston-Galveston Area Council, and I want to thank you for joining us today and invite you for a quick tour along I-69 to Wharton County. As you can see, as we leave Houston, we have a lot of compact development, both residential and commercial. As we go into Fort Bend County, we have additional dense and compact development. As we start going through Fort Bend County and into Wharton County, the development is a lot less compact, and we have a lot of land available for development in rural areas. And as we reach Wharton, we can see little pockets of dense development in commercial and residential. And we move on to El Campo, which is our host city today, and see additional development. And as you can see, the growth from suburban or urban Houston is moving out to the suburban areas and rural areas. And today we're going to talk about how cities can poise themselves for growth as the growth is coming from Houston. Our first presenter today is Jillian Donato. She is a senior regional planner here at the Houston-Galveston Area Council.
Thank you, Andrea. There we go. Thank you, Andrea. All right. So yeah, I am Jillian Donato, and today I'm going to sort of set the table and prime the discussion around economic development through a couple of different lenses. The first being that of one from a sort of site selection, non-native corporate headquarters relocation or a new industrial expansion perspective, and then from the perspective of a young talented worker or a member of the multi-generational workforce. And then I'm going to end the discussion with some high-level trends that I've been following that relate to rural areas, the agricultural economy, and things that I thought might be relevant to discuss today as it relates to El Campo's situation. So just covering a little bit about what we'll talk about today. And to kick it off, I wanted to talk about what site selectors typically look for on behalf of companies, or if there's an internal relocation lead. There's an entire industry and 30 to 40 years of skill and research that's gone into creating the ideal mix of environmental factors that make for an easy transition for a company. Or if they're seeking to expand, these are also things that may be pushing them towards another community. So there are areas where you can focus on retention and expansion as well. Transportation and access to markets, both very key for El Campo's location. Supply chain, utilities and infrastructure, including telecom, broadband is increasingly important. What it'll do to their bottom line, their finance, local and state taxes, income taxes, proprietor taxes, relocation and construction costs, and last but definitely not least is labor availability and the quality of the laborship. Before they even arrive in your community, for a FAM tour or to actually shake a hand of an economic developer or somebody representing the community, they'll know all of these things about you and be able to discover them online, as I did prior to this session. And they'll know, this is the state of Texas. It's a top 3 market as far as ease of doing business, according to, site selectors. Local tax base is really strong here. We have a lot of local development tools and tax mechanisms that we can use in support of our economic development goals. El Campo has access to 3 of the largest markets in Texas. As Andrea mentioned, there's some great connectivity in the transportation network. Economic drivers are listed prominently on their front page as they're highly competitive in aquaculture and agricultural commodities like rice and formerly dairies, farming and ranching, oil and gas being proximate to the Eagle Ford Shale region. And for all of these strong commodities bases, they have a really fantastic wholesale and trade and logistics industry to support those and get those products to market. They feature prominently a lot of these important indicators up front and center on their website. You can easily download community profiles and specific information that you're looking for. You can see loads and capacities and costs for different utilities, what they have access to. And they feature their commercial real estate, vacant land, and industrial parks. And this all reflects, a very conscientious focus on what they're seeking, including demographic indicators, which these I grabbed from the CDC's profiles pages. Population of just under 12,000, with a labor force of a little over half that, median age of about 35, which is not too far off from the state. Educational attainment is pretty split. 16% of the population has a bachelor's degree or graduate degree, while 25% have not earned a high school diploma or equivalent, and the remainder are in the mid-skills categories. Household income, slightly higher than the county, but not quite as high as the state in the Houston region. 71% of households are families, and the average commute time is 22 minutes. So that reflects that, they're not having to commute too far to get to and from their jobs. They have a strong small business base. 82% of businesses have less than 10 employees. And the breakdown of workforce distribution is 58% white collar, 42% blue collar. And then again, this all reflects the sort of industry thinking behind economic development from employer-led infrastructure, what they need to be successful, and how communities can accommodate that and allow for the businesses themselves to make those decisions. However, over the last 30 to 40 years, there's been a transition in some of those things no longer being of such preeminent importance, or at least the distribution of those assets has been widely spread across the country. And slowly each year, the top indicators that are listed here are what site selectors are looking for increasingly from their communities that they locate in. Highway accessibility, so that trade and logistics component is really crucial, as well as the ease of the commuting population to get to their jobs. Labor costs, labor availability, and quality of life. So anything related to workforce, talent, the people that fill these roles in these jobs has risen to the top and is leading the way. And every year it gets more and more important. Quality of life used to be at the bottom, and it was sort of assumed to be really tangential to the challenges of businesses, but now they recognize how interwoven it is with their talent needs. So it's a really important factor, and it's more important than things like tax exemptions, and then things like incentives to relocate have dropped. So this happy picture here actually reflects the modern reality of the quote unquote war on talent, as happy as it looks. There's a multi-generational workforce right now that's unlike one that we've ever really seen. There's currently 5 different generations actively working in the workforce, and we'll be collaborating together in the workforce for the next 5 or 10 years or so. And I won't go too into all the different demographic groups, but suffice it to say that this is the most diverse workforce we've seen from an age, race and ethnicity, educational attainment standpoint. And it's increasingly important for businesses to be attracting a whole range of members of talent, of the different talent cohorts. And what we do see is that there's a burgeoning focus on what these different groups want and need. The thing that does remain consistent across all generations is things like, this is a sort of diffuse term, but quality of the environment, which does reflect the balance of health and safety, good schools, quality parks and recreational amenities. What we're seeing that a lot of communities and even colleges are focusing more on attracting younger generations, and there's a push towards, car optional living or the share economy being a big part of how they afford the amenities that previous generations were able to have, but that they may not want to own on their own. They're seeking places that align with their values, and that includes companies as well as communities that they live in. They are actively seeking experiences and engagement. And there's a burgeoning industry around talent location and how we assess the communities that we want to join. And I think this is another thing that I was impressed with El Campo's awareness of, and they also reflected that online, and a focus on what parks are available, schools, healthcare. It's also important to feature your community's diverse members, and tell the story of who you are and who you plan to become. There are other things too that communities can focus on that aren't as expensive as things like transportation infrastructure, but to communities and to individuals and talents, they're increasingly important. And I like to call out things like informal mayors and empowering the members of your community that look like or represent the types of people that you're wanting to attract, and empowering them to spread the message, create events and engagement tools, and to really focus on building on what you have. And I put a little picture here of the 901 Rocks, which is an initiative from Memphis, which, you know, some communities can afford to have a big set of sculptures that are artistically done and spread around town. But in Memphis, they painted rocks, and community members left them all over different neighborhoods. And it was a place-based initiative that was almost zero cost, but that got the community really, really excited. And I like to use it as an example of a way to really connect with your community in a unique way that members who are not of your community might find really intriguing and interesting, and reflective of a level of engagement that they might want to be a part of. And I know that this conversation becomes a little bit hard. Do we cater to business, or do we cater to talent? And do they require things that are really something that we can navigate together? But I do think that you have to learn to be able to do them both at the same time, because what we learned from Amazon was that, you know, while New York was not even on the top 5 of the list in terms of what people predicted would happen, they ended up choosing, at least initially, New York City because of the base of talent that was there. There were a lot of things that were more complicated, that were more challenging, but they chose that above all else. And it's a useful way to think about how companies are approaching these same challenges. And the next part I'm going to cover kind of quickly is this pre and post COVID reality and how it relates to a community like El Campo and Wharton County. And I'm just throwing out some disclaimers here just to say, you know, I work for a public agency, and all of this is still very up in the air. We are actively living in history, and we are, you know, communicating with each other about what we think may happen, and what sort of reason we have for optimism there is. But I do want to say, like, none of this is a sure science, and this is a conceptual level discussion, and I'm more than welcoming discussion of this in the Q&A period. What I've found is, you know, there was a lot of discussion around what would happen for manufacturing, trade and logistics, and different types of trade trends with agriculture as it relates to the USMCA, COVID, and the energy crisis that we're in right now, or the oil pricing issues that we're facing right now, are really accelerating a lot of trends that we were already seeing. And we've sort of arrived at a perfect storm, as they say, of a shifting in the entire global landscape. And we don't really know what that's going to mean yet. But one of the things that, or some of the things that I've been following that I thought might relate to today, are definitely how retail, small businesses are being impacted. Amazon and the rise of delivery services are increasingly put under pressure. That is something that is going to surely continue. USMCA and the trend towards nearshoring and reshoring, or the recapture of manufacturing jobs as required by the USMCA. Rural communities are definitely going to be able to capture some of that. And it's starting slow, but I do think in the COVID world, this is going to accelerate. Ag is it's already experiencing a lot of really acute pressure before COVID, related to demographics and the workforce trends that I talked about. There's a huge need to attract young workforce there. And there's been a trend towards consolidation that may not be able to continue on if it's so impacted by the supply chain shifts. There needs to be sort of a recalibration of regional supply chains, and localism was something that was really tied to retail, food and beverage. Is that going to be able to survive? Will it actually strengthen? I think that that might be the actual long-term case, is that it actually becomes that much more important for us to have stronger local food sheds. Technology and access to broadband, obviously we're all on this, what would be an in-person meeting, we're having this now on a network. Data, the importance of data, which we're going to talk about a little bit later, and the rise of robotics and artificial intelligence tools are going to be front and center for a lot of large suppliers, major manufacturers, and industrial sites. So that's going to, in the long term, be a big source of investment gains in the coming years. Talent-related opportunities, I do think that, you know, generations Z and Y, or millennials as some call them, are really passionate about DIY, and I know half of my friends have a sourdough starter under their sink right now. There's also going to be more and more people looking for that work-life balance so that they can work remotely and still have flexibility. Everybody's like, the unemployment shifts that we're seeing are impacting the gig economy in a very serious way, but we're not even yet able to grasp or harness that because of the way that taxes are reported. So I do think that's going to continue, and I think that what rural areas offer these young members of the workforce, like myself, is the ability to cultivate more skills. Lifelong learning and e-learning is that much more accessible now. I think there's going to be a really interesting, unique shift back towards rural areas, because urban areas are a challenge to afford, and now even some floor plans don't make sense for people anymore. In the future, some things that may need to be completely reinvented are how we think about how we gather and how we entertain one another, a push back towards public spaces and open spaces. We've seen in urban areas open streets movements. Rural areas already have a lot of great open spaces and a strong commitment to staying connected. And workplace design is going to need to be rethought. So large Class A buildings are going to be that much more expensive because you can only use sometimes half the space. And if this is going to be a trend that even lasts for 2 years, that could have dramatic impacts. Energy and ag food supply chain are going to be huge issues for our region. And again, harkening back to this current discussion, public engagement is going to transform, and we need to be staying very well aware of that and how it's going to impact our abilities to hear and understand what people need, balance equity considerations for different rural areas and even parts of urban communities. All of these are going to are by necessity going to be reinvented. And it's a time to be optimistic and forward-looking. And just to end the discussion on something else that I found, again, I feel like El Campo has really got their finger on the pulse of a lot of this, and they've been doing a lot of work for a number of years on these efforts. And in my learning about your community, I found the Foremost building, which is formerly a dairy that the city is actively working with a developer to convert into something more community oriented, either a cafe, brewery, children's museum. There were some really phenomenal, high, very visionary sort of moonshot concepts for how to take something of the city's heritage that represents who they are culturally and turn it into something that represents where they're going. And there's a lot of story there. And all of it is built on a number of years of plans. I put on the left here their strategic plan, which I think is really rich and reflective of so much thought and great benchmarks. It's something I would recommend people check out. Their downtown revitalization plan, which is already having benefits. And then I love that the ISD is also focusing on innovation, how they connect with their students. And it seems like there is sort of a coalescence of the institutions and the organizations across your community, and it's all heading in a really positive way. And I know that that's a challenge to do, and I'm excited to hear more from our stakeholders on the line. And with that, I hope to hear more from you all in the Q&A, and we can touch back on some of what we discussed.
Thank you. We'll have it open for questions at the end of the presentation.
Yeah,
I
that's fine.
want to remind everybody that you can raise your hands or ask a question if you have a question that you think of that maybe you might not remember at the end, or if you just want to ask it right away, and just put it in the question box and we'll hang on to it to the end unless it's something we need to answer right away. I also want to remind you that the agenda is available in the handouts box, and it should have come with your reminder. Additional speakers this morning are going to be Chad Odom with the Wharton Economic Development Corporation and Todd Lang with the International Economic Development Council. But first, we're going to hear from Courtney Sledek, from the city manager of El Campo, and I apologize if I'm mispronouncing your name. I heard you say it, and I'm still not sure if I got it right. But she has served as city manager since May 2019 and will now share more information about economic conditions in El Campo and how the city is poised for growth.
Good morning, and I hope everyone is healthy and doing well in this COVID crisis. I must admit that I created this presentation prior to COVID. Let me make sure you can see my screen. Okay. Are we, Andrea, you can see my screen, correct?
Yes, ma'am. Thank you.
So, like I said, I created this presentation prior to COVID, although many of it still applies. And actually, throughout this presentation, I'll be sprinkling it with how we've used these tools for our growth. I'm trying to move this out of the way. I think you're seeing my. Okay. So a little bit about El Campo. We're halfway between Houston and Victoria. We're about 1 hour, give or take, southwest of Houston. For those of us that don't know, we're on the major corridors of what will become I-69 and US Highway 71 right now, that is known as 59. Our population, as was mentioned by Jillian, is just under 12,000. We are the largest city in Wharton County, and we have over 4,600 households. So we are a rural community. 30%, over 30% of our population speaks Spanish. We have a new city manager. That's myself. I was an internal candidate. I served as the deputy city manager prior to coming on. I'm actually celebrating my anniversary on Friday. We have somewhat of a new council. We received that last year, and somewhat of a relatively new management team. Our EMS director, planning director, and finance director, all less than 2 years tenure here. I think that's worked to our advantage. It's kind of brought some new ideas. Some of those members came from much larger cities in the region. I won't say where, and so they brought in some ideas, and that's really worked to our advantage. Here are some of the major industries we have. Junior Smokehouse provides all of the sausage to Buc-ee's convenience stores. They manufacture that sausage here in El Campo. Proshix is just outside of our city limits, and they provide the jerky to all H-EBs, all the H-EBs. Lido is a European cabinet manufacturer, and Tough Country Outfitters provides lift kits and additional equipment for trucks. And so they've been featured in some movies. I thought I'd mention them. They're in our top 10 employers, and they're also really essential to our tax base. Gillian mentioned our strategic plan, and I'm really not going to read these slides in the interest of time. My presentation is available online, but I just wanted to hint that economic development is a priority and has remained a priority in our strategic plan. And so we've included in there through balanced growth and to enhance our community character. Throughout this presentation, I'll be talking about the City Economic Development Corporation, the City Development Corporation, which is a Type A sales tax economic development corporation. They are a component unit of the city, although they are standalone and they do not report to me. We have a great partnership with Carolyn Gibson, the director over there. Some of the initiatives I will be talking about are partnerships with them. So here's the tools that we've used, mainly in the last year, but probably going back even further, and I'm going to show you the results at the end of this presentation. We've utilized geographic information systems to aid in development. And we've hired a firm called Verdenuity to perform a land use fiscal analysis. We've leveraged our partnerships with companies like Retail Strategies and Sales Tax Assurance to look at our data. And then we've promoted shopping locally. So first, with GIS. Now, almost every city has GIS, and it's available if you go to our website at www.cityofelcampo.org. It's available on the bottom, GIS mapping. We are including new maps that aren't typical out there, and I'm going to show you them. I'm going to walk you through some of them to help facilitate growth. And let me just kind of walk you through that, what that looks like. So we've got some non-traditional maps, like I mentioned. We've got a vacant land map and a child safety zone map, and these two you don't normally see on websites. The vacant land map shows all of the vacant properties in El Campo. But just because they're vacant doesn't mean they're available. And I'm going to show you what that looks like. And then we've got the El Campo child safety zone, and this is really useful because it shows it pertains to sex offenders and where they can and can't live. I'm not really going to talk about that today, but that's just two examples of kind of moving outside of the GIS comfort zone with just zoning and annexation. We reached out to the geography class last May, and they gave us some ideas of some maps they'd like to see, as well as a forum with community groups, and they want to see us map values. So we've been working towards that. But here's the map on vacant land, and if you go to our site, it's live. So all of the highlighted parcels, and they're different colors. I'm going to get to why in a second. Those are all the vacant land parcels right now, which means that they have nothing on them. And the zoning is differentiated by color because we do have zoning in El Campo. It's mapped by parcel, and then we pull the data from the CAD. And so this is what it looks like when you drill down. When you go to one of our maps and you click on one of the properties, you're going to see the acreage, the zoning distinction, and you're also going to see what can go there and what can't, the zoning regulations. There's a link directly to that. You're also going to see the CAD value. So all of that is out there. We've seen some success with this, primarily residential development for infill, which is exactly what we're looking for. But we also have a lot of developers out of town that are looking at these maps and calling us. It's really important on the zoning because about 2 years ago, we had a developer buy a piece of property that wasn't zoned correctly and then was really irritated that they couldn't build what they wanted to because we couldn't rezone it. And so that's part of the reason we direct people here first. And we check that obviously as they come in with their plans. The second thing we've done is hire Verdenuity to perform a land use physical analysis. And this was because I believed personally that we needed to take a broader look at development. I feel like it's not sustainable the way in the manner we're handling it, in that we are not drilling down and looking deeper. And I'm going to walk you through exactly what I'm talking about. Verdenuity has created this to help us create zoning and design guidelines to align development patterns and to inform us on infrastructure and economic development investments. They did this by mapping the current levy, the tax levy, minus the operating budget, and then they added in the projected general fund costs and unfunded street costs over future years. And that created a baseline model to project our fiscal performance. Just as another disclaimer, I worked for 17 years in finance, municipal finance, so of course this is of interest to me. But we identified growth patterns, our property tax rate versus our general fund revenues, and then this one is particularly interesting for a couple of reasons. The general fund comparison. How are we performing against other cities in our region? Because we do hear that taxes are high in El Campo, and so this gives us a good look at that. It's also a good way to check for fraud. And the property tax levy by parcel, and then our net revenue per acre. So here's the results. We mapped out the growth pattern, which I would encourage you to do. You don't have to hire a firm like Verdenuity, but but we didn't have the resources to do this, so this is why we used them. We mapped out our growth pattern, and you can see it on the screen from 2005 to 2018. And actually, in our comprehensive plan, we started in 2017. It's interesting to see how the 18 is aligning with that. It's not. We really expected growth to come along here. And so it's surprising that the growth is over here. But I guess that happens sometimes. Then we looked at our property tax rate versus our general fund revenue over time. And I think for me, what's most interesting is what has happened in the last year is we dramatically dropped the property tax rate, but we maintained the revenues. And we were able to do that through sales tax. And I'm going to tell you how we got there. That's a double-edged sword, especially during COVID, when we have such a reliance on sales tax. Sales tax is our largest revenue source. And so right now, we're a little concerned of how that's going to look, especially over the next 3 months, but in 2021 and 2022. So this is very helpful to us to look at that. And then this is the big one. Are we going to be able to afford to maintain our streets? Are we going to be able to afford to maintain our basic infrastructure while balancing growth? And that has to be at the forefront. And the answer is, I don't know. I didn't know. And now we know that it would cost us to get all of our streets in compliance by 2050, $203 million. $203 million. And so that's just not something that we have been budgeting for. We've been planning on doing our streets every 7 years. We've been throwing about $400,000 towards it. And now, as part of a result of this, we've created a transportation user fee that goes on utility bills, and those funds are directly towards streets. So recognizing this has helped us make some really important decisions. One thing we did was in our design manual and our standards, we reduced the width of the street so it's less to maintain, so it costs less. But we're also looking at a whole lot of other things. Another thing we did was we purchased a zipper for full depth reclamation, which saved us a lot of money. So we've been using this information to make decisions to try to mitigate that risk. And that was the whole point of this land use physical analysis. It also directs our attention and our decisions on economic development when we see applications come in for incentives. And here's where I lead into the CDC, the Type A that I mentioned. They hired retail strategies. There's all kinds of opportunities to recruit businesses. Retail strategies is by no means the only one. I know there's Retail Coach, Buxom. I'm not promoting. I don't get a cut off of retail strategies, but this is who we've used over the last several years, and their job is to promote El Campo and recruit businesses for El Campo. And you can see some of the challenges we faced as a rural community and as a city without an economic development department in-house. We have to rely heavily on partnerships with others. The results are pretty clear. 141 jobs and an estimated sales tax of almost 500,000. That's why you saw that gap in the tax rate versus the general fund revenue. And I believe it's largely attributable to this and some of the other things I'm going to talk about in my presentation. But we saw Pally Royal open up and expand into an old Blockbuster. I mean, who's seen a Blockbuster in 15 years? Taco Bell came into our community. Sears came into our community. Stripes, Domino's Pizza. And actually what's interesting about Domino's is they came into our downtown area, which is where we really needed them. And so a great success story there. We also use H-GAC. They have a online application you can use, and we subscribe to it, where it provides data about the sales tax. This is data we could collect on our own if we sent a letter to the comptroller and signed and did all this analysis, but we pay a subscription fee annually, and we split it with that Economic Development Corporation to look at our sales tax. And the reason we want to do that, especially right now, COVID, is so we can pick up trends, and it helps with budgeting, but it also helps Carol and Gibson find these businesses that may be struggling, or where are the leakages, and where is it that we need to pinpoint. And I know we both, she provides this information to her board on a monthly basis, and this information is available also on our website. More charts. I think there's like 15 to 20 charts. Some of it I'm not able to share with you because it's confidential, but it shows the moving average and the monthly taxes. It actually also creates some projections through either linear regression or moving average to prepare you for the next budget cycle. I don't know if all that's gone out the window right now, but here's just a snapshot of some of the charts we have and we use. And then, of course, it tells us where's our sales tax coming from. Again, not proprietary because I don't break it down, but this 38% is troubling with COVID in the last month. So we're keeping our eye on it. It's really important that we understand that our retail was struggling, and maybe we make adjustments for that. And as we grow, we know where we need to invest in. And I'm gonna close out a little bit early so our next presenter can have time, because he has a really great presentation. But I'm gonna, with this Shop Local campaign, and this isn't mine, this is CDC, but it's working. Here's some of the ads they ran recently. Now more than ever, please shop local. This was pre-COVID. Shop local, shop local. I mean, this is hammered into our Leader News. Leader News is our local paper. This is in the paper almost every edition, so that they can see that shop. Just a reminder of in your face, you can get this stuff here. And I love this one. Not shopping local, bananas. CDC has a great partnership with the newspaper to develop these ads. And here's the results of it. This is the sales tax, 1.5% that goes to the City Development Corporation, or the EDC, and you can tell from 2010 to 2019 just what the efforts have yielded, and that's huge. And that's just their portion. I'm about to show you ours, but all of these tools are making a difference in allowing us to lower the property tax rate, which hopefully would entice growth. In our own circumstances, we've seen over 1.8 million over 10 years, or 73% increase, and a 24% increase in just the last 5 years alone. Now we are estimating that number is going to drop dramatically in the next year, but there's hope that when we come out of this, we'll continue to see that number trend up. And I would attribute it to many of the tools we've talked about in this presentation. This really concludes my presentation, but I am available for questions afterwards. My contact information is on this slide. Feel free to call or email me directly, and I will be happy to answer any questions about anything I discussed in this presentation. And like I mentioned, my presentation is saved and is available through the H-GAC website. So thank you very much.
Thank you. And how exciting are those sales tax numbers, and how fun were those bananas, right? So our next presenter is Chad Odom. He is the Executive Director for the Wharton Economic Development Corporation.
Hi, can you hear me?
Yes, we can hear you. Thank you.
Great. So I lost my audio on my feed, so I'm trying to, I called in, so I'm on my conference line. I'm glad everybody can hear. Very simple presentation today. Courtney and Carolyn have great things going over in El Campo. They're our sister city, just about 11 miles away. And so I spent a lot of time working with the El Campo City Development to mirror and make sure that we're doing things that are symbiotic in nature, so that we don't cannibalize each other. And just to piggyback on the shop local that they've been doing, we actually had a call yesterday and are finalizing a Be Open, Be Safe, Be Open program that's going to try to encourage all the county residents to shop within the county. So during COVID-19, Wharton County has stayed relatively safe. As of yesterday, we had 16 active cases of the virus in the community. I think we've peaked at 35 for the total positive tests. So we've had, or maybe 37 were total positive tests, and we've had 21 recoveries. And so we're trying to leverage that to try to help our shoppers feel safe shopping at home and listing all of the retail opportunities that exist within the county in both Wharton and El Campo and the smaller communities around, so that we encourage folks not to travel in the immediate time to hotter areas where there's more COVID spread. I am under the belief that the reason Wharton County is so relatively non-affected by COVID has a lot to do with Fort Bend and Harris shutting down, meaning there was no way for us to go over. There was no reason for our citizens to go over there and become infected in larger crowds, and so we've been isolated by default. And so now we want to purposefully phase back into our opening of our businesses, helping our businesses be safe, helping our customers feel safe and feel comfortable going to our local establishments, knowing that there's some personal protective equipment available and that there's some certain standard practices by the CDC that are being followed by our businesses. And so Carolyn and I and the chambers of both cities, and we're about to reach out to the other small communities to have a countywide effort with that. And, within what Courtney said, and as impressive as that is, the long game on growth is going to be regional cooperation and quality of place, and so quality of environment. And the first speaker hit on that. So let's see if I can get my slides to change. Here's where we are in relation to Houston. This is how we market ourselves on the on the website. If you see, of course, all the yellow is all of the interstate highways that we're connected to. I-59 and the 69 corridor. I-69 is coming toward us and is scheduled to be completed all the way to the Colorado River, which is almost to El Campo by 2026, but all the way through Wharton by that point. The red on this map represents rail and shows how you can import from overseas and forego the Panama Canal by using the ports in Mexico and using what used to be called NAFTA rail to bring products in and get products out of our region. And El Campo has made a serious investment in an industrial park that has rail access. So we're all going to benefit from that. But today, and when I was asked to speak, I was asked to speak about some housing projects we had going on and how it relates to downtown. And so I think in a small town, and we'll get in a minute to some maps to show kind of spatially where these projects are in relation to downtown. But I think it's important to note, as we are all small towns, that we keep in mind that everybody in our town has proximity to downtown. We're so small that it doesn't even, it's not even about, we got to make downtown more accessible. The real goal, I think, from our perspective, is making housing more available and having the housing plug in to walkability and dual use pathways that enhance a quality of life that makes small towns attractive. So to me, it's about filling in the gaps of what keeps millennials in larger urban environments and kind of cross-referencing what a small town environment can do to alter its own state to offer some of those things that we don't have now but could have in the future. I hold a degree in urban planning from the University of New Orleans, and I realized after my degree when I was working in post-Katrina New Orleans that as we were rebuilding New Orleans, we were using a lot of the techniques that were being used in something called new urbanism. And what new urbanism is, it's creating nodes or centers of commerce and human activity that you can build housing around so people have a place to walk to, and it creates neighborhoods. And within studying that and watching that happen in New Orleans, I realized that small towns already have these spatial qualities. Small towns already have a way to walk downtown. It may not be marked, so it may not be as safe as it could be, but it's there. And if you'll pay attention in your small town and take a look at where people are walking, where people are riding bikes, you see people getting around in the oddest ways. Just a couple of weeks ago, before this COVID thing, I saw a guy on a bicycle that was pulling a lawnmower and had his weed eater and had his gasoline and stuff strapped all over his lawnmower like a trailer, and was riding down a main road in town, going somewhere to mow somebody's yard. Now, is that the safest way to do something? Probably not. But did the guy probably make it there without dying? I could say it's 100% yes. Nobody got killed on a bicycle that day. So it's about creating the spatial makeup and the opportunities for our small community, in my case, in the city of Wharton, to be able to maximize what we do have as far as quality of life. The slide before you now shows the patterns of commuting over time. And so you'll see that we've lagged down. The orange is people who drive less than 10 miles to work in our jobs here in the city of Wharton. The blue is people who drive 10 to 24 miles. And then the yellow and green are 20 to 50, and then 50 or greater. So as you can see right now, and for the last 5 years, we've had virtually 50% of our workers that work at the plants and the primary jobs that we have here are driving at least 25 miles to work. And so what that means for those companies, and if you call like I do and poll these companies, their biggest problem is attrition, and it's workforce development and attrition. So they spend a lot of time and money training people who are low to medium skilled to have the skill set they need to perform a function at their facility. And then if you're driving 25 miles or more, you're only going to do that until you find a lateral move closer than 25 miles, and then you're moving. So they're seeing attrition based on, I think, a large part the commute patterns that we've seen. Here's another map to illustrate that, where the workers live from Wharton, and the majority do live right around the area, but you can see going out how far of a reach we draw in to create our workforce here. Our workforce is largely the school district. We have two major plastics manufacturers. We have agriculture doing eggs and other kind of ag projects. Those are the major industries in our community. Moving on to kind of placemaking, this map shows a step we took. So I'd be remiss if I didn't say that after Harvey, we flooded a few days after the storm left us because of the rains upriver from the Colorado River, and 70% of our built environment was inundated with water, which is catastrophic to a town. But in true Wharton fashion, being resilient, we bounced right back. Our businesses bounced right back. The census will tell the tale of population loss. We're guessing and estimating that we lost anywhere between 5 and 10% of our population due to Harvey. So we took measures to try and prepare for the future and prepare for a place for those folks to come back, but also to attract new people who could come enjoy what Wharton has to offer and enter our workforce. So this slide represents, in the green is a facility from the Army Corps of Engineers that is 100% federally funded, that is in the process of land acquisition and will be built over the next 60 months to put in levees and sumps to protect us. The yellow part is a corridor that we partnered with the Urban Land Institute to come make through one of our impoverished areas of town to give the shortest path to our downtown district from the freeway, anticipating that the freeway would come. So the levee projects are underway. That should be a 60-month timeline for about $73 to $77 million to be built. We also have our local schools passed a $60 million bond initiative to rebuild all of our schools in town. That's right at 133. million. We have 23 million more multifamily, which we'll get to later. We're going to extend farm to market 1301, and then the interstate highway project comes in, and we end up with a total of about $500 million in stimulus that's going to come down toward us in the next 5 to 7 years. So my direct job and what I've been focused on since the COVID-19 is directly gauging the impact on our small businesses and restaurants, because with $500 million of stimulus coming our way, we want to make sure that we're as close to full capacity to handle the stimulus that comes from that. Meaning, if we go through this thing and we come out with 50% of our restaurants open, we're going to be at 50% of capacity to handle the workers that are coming to do that work. And if we have 70% open, it's 70%, 100%, it's 100%. So we're kind of measuring where we are along those lines. Just the levy project and the school bond, we did an economic impact analysis, and the direct and indirect impact of stimulus with those two projects got $873 million in impact, and that's less than a fifth of, or right at a fifth of, what the total projects that are coming our way. So after Harvey and having gone through Katrina, and you guys are in a vulnerable region, so that after storms we kind of become nerds, right, about following other storms. So I could tell you some of the things that the federal government did for Sandy, and I could tell you some of the things the federal government did for Katrina and Rita. And as those things happen, you kind of start monitoring that. So I knew right after Harvey and during our flooding, while there were still floodwaters in my house and in my neighborhood, I could tell you I was already calling our congressional delegation and having the leaders call the congressional delegation to try to figure out what the recovery was going to look like. Meaning, are you sending us FEMA trailers? Are we going to have community development block grants going to come down through what agency? Well, we ended up getting community development block grants for multi-housing coming through the general land office. And they had a short window program that the GLO rolled out. I think it was a total of 6 to 8 weeks from the time they announced the program till the time the submissions were closed to be involved in the program. And so I did my version of scrambling. At that point, I called every developer that in my short tenure here had come into contact with that showed interest in Wharton. And then I called other developers who had never heard from me before. But it was a total of 12 developers, made 12 applications all over town. Some were local stakeholders, some were national, some were already had property here, some had interest here, some didn't. And we had one young lady or woman who found a loophole within the application process where you could take one rehabilitated structure and you could add new construction to it, and it enhanced when you were allowed to submit for the projects. And so long story short is we did have 3 projects locally funded. They were funded under that loophole where there's a rehab and then reconstruct component. They are labeled in red boxes on the map you see to your right. The downtown square, you can clearly see right under where it says Wharton. So they all have walkability, proximity to downtown. The one furthest to your right is the Able Street School. It is under consideration. They're going to do a feasibility study about saving the existing structure. It is a school that was built in the 1930s under the CCC. And so it's my anticipation that some or all of that building will be saved and repurposed to house some of the units, and then the remainder of the units necessary will go around, and they'll be done in a spatial way that mimics the density of the neighborhood and enhances the neighborhood itself. That's project number 1. Project number 2, you can see, is to the smaller box to the left. It's only 9 units. So the first one was 34. This is 9 units, which would be built right next to the Chamber of Commerce on the main corridor. It's kind of a new urbanist concept with cottages. So everybody will have their own little cottage, like a takeoff on the Katrina cottage model, but they'll have nice landscaping and good access to sidewalks that they can walk to toward downtown. The third project are the remaining 2 boxes. So, and I should say, so the first project I mentioned to the right for the school district is a 5149 low to moderate income composition, which means 51% of those units have to be held for low to moderate income people. Now, the difference between this program and the housing projects that you traditionally see in a small town with LIHTC, with low-income housing tax credits and all those things, those LIHTC projects are competitive. And they're competitive to the sense that you get more points for housing poorer people. Okay, so if you have a LIHTC option come, I've often seen the LIHTC go down to 20-25% of the median income be who they're working with, and they'll have a Section 8 component where people can live on vouchers. These projects aren't like that. These projects allow 80% of the median income for the county. And so we're turning these projects into workforce preference housing. So under HUD guidelines, you can't reserve or exclude people from moving into federally funded housing if they're a protected class, right? We can't have a, all Episcopalian subdivision where all Episcopalians get to move in and no Lutherans, or things like that. But what they do allow you to do is they allow you to have employer preference housing, just like they do for veterans and for veteran housing. They allow you to say, hey, the first marketing for these and the first consideration for marketing are going to go to these people, and so you can list them in order. So for the school district's project, they're going to list their own employees as number one. And so when there's a vacancy or as they lease up, their employees will have the first opportunity to lease the building, whether they're on the 49%, that can be anybody, like a principal or anybody making any income, or whether it's the 51% who has to be at 80% of LMI, which works out for a single person to be about $37,000, which they have employees that make that. They get first consideration. Beyond that, you can have other employers line up, and they are. And so it would be J.M. Eagle and Nanya, who are our plastics manufacturers. They're part of that high attrition problem that I described on my first slide. And so you have this sliding scale where we're moving in these federal projects, but we're tying them to local employers. And nobody I'm working with wants to use the term workforce housing. For some reason, that's not in vogue to say, but that's exactly what this is. This employer preference housing model is exactly workforce housing. It means that you can give preference to city employees, first responders, nurses, any employer that wants to sign up to be a part of the program, and they get the first marketing pitch at that. So when the vacancy becomes available, they blast out to, on a tiered level, to the school district, then to the major employers, or then to the EMS, or then to veterans, and so on and so forth. So all these projects are going to lease up and be leased by that. The other cool thing about the GLL multifamily housing is you get grandfathered in. So let's say you get one of these and you're making, you're a single person and you're making $37,000 a year working at Nanya Plastics, and the next year you get married, and then your wife gets a good job and you get a promotion. Well, if you get into this program right now, you don't get kicked out for making more money. There's no penalty for being successful as a person when you live here. So it truly creates a mix of salaries that creates a vibrant economy, and it avoids concentrations of poverty, which I think is what the whole point of how HUD has changed what they've done is. So you'll see the cottage. We'll move back over to the cottage. It's the same way. It's going to be 5149. It's only 9 units. It's split into 2 sites, and there's one other little house. If you see my cursor, I didn't make a box for it. There's 2 other little houses that are going up here, and then there's 9 houses that are going on this site. It's got a beautiful layout. It's going to mimic the density of the downtown and have a little commercial space and try to make that the focal point that starts the downtown. The big box below it and the remaining box are a split site project, 49 units that must be, since it's a split site, 100% low to moderate income. But again, it's at that 80% level. So a family of three making $43,000 is going to be eligible to live here. Fits directly within the workforce that's hired at our major employers. It will be employee preference housing. The neat thing about this one is it does a couple of things. It gives a buffer to a residential neighborhood that's going to have commercial built next to it, and then on the lower box, it will mimic. So they'll build buildings and it'll mimic the downtown. So we're actually going to get an extension of downtown Wharton, which is Milam Street, which will go to the west side of the road, and those buildings will be built in a way in a density that mimics the downtown, and the downtown gets an injection of 40 or so new residents that are pedestrian traffic for them to justify higher sales at their businesses. If you look to the left, you'll see where our existing multifamily units are. The newest multifamily unit we have, by the way, was finished up in the early 90s. So it's been 30 years since we've had multifamily housing built in Wharton. This shows the concentration of where our restaurants are currently, and you can see, if you can imagine, where we have some building going on here, some building going on here, and some building going on here. So we're trying to accentuate what we already have from a walkability standpoint. This is the connectivity plan that's in the city's master plan, and there's some important things that we've done. Even before Harvey and before the housing, this is a principle. You can look at a town like Wharton or a town like El Campo, but even more so Wharton, because we're just a little bit closer to Houston, and you see our neighbors kind of get taken over by this suburbia effect. So if you go to Rosenberg or Richmond, it's hard to tell whether you're in Sugar Land, Rosenberg, Richmond, Phoenix, Arizona, or any other place that gets developed. And so what I notice about Wharton and what I see in Wharton is there's a lot of pride in the uniqueness of who we are. And a lot of that has to do with the fact that we're built in an alluvial plain, which makes the street patterns not as Jeffersonian grid as most places, right? We weren't really built around the railroad. We were built around agriculture. And so we were bringing products to market, and we were building houses in places that didn't flood. And so our street patterns reflect that. So it was important to me and my organization. We commissioned this connectivity planning, which was this was done by GrantWorks and then enhanced by the American Planning Association on a grant that we got, which also took those green spaces for the facilities and turned them into recreational concepts so we can go forward. So going from COVID-19, I think Wharton and El Campo both have a unique opportunity, but what we're going to do about this is we're taking this connectivity plan, and just like I said, some of these are already built, some of them aren't, but like I talked about the guy with the lawnmower, pulling it behind his bike, he was driving down one of these streets on a corridor. He made it to where he was going safely. So we're tracking how people can get around safe, and then the goal then is to transpose this street pattern, connectivity included, transpose this street pattern on what you see in the upper left quadrant, which is pasture land. So if you take a look at the pasture land we have, and you take a look at that purple line that runs from the Freeway 59 all the way over to 60, that is a proposed road that is going to be funded this year and going to be built into the future. So we're currently in the process of master planning that whole area in blue there, where the planning area is. That's ongoing. It's funded. We'll have a land use plan draft in the next 4 weeks, and it is going to take into account that connectivity and our street pattern, and I think our relative safety compared to the neighboring counties during this COVID-19 crisis, in a plan to build more of the same of what we are. I think we bring in some broadband, which we're looking into. We're going to be very competitive to get some of those people who may not want as much density in the urban area as they thought they did just some weeks ago. Here's the concept for some of the green space in one of the sumps. You see an amphitheater. You see a walkway and a trail on the wetlands. There'll be over 230 acres of green space that's left by the sumps that this creates. So we think Wharton's positioned to grow to grow in a manner where people can have desirable densities of where they live. They can have connectivity to the historic downtown and new nodes of commerce that are created, and they'll have the opportunity to have their own space for social distancing if that's a premium going into the future. And I'll take questions later too. And thanks so much for listening.
Thank you. I know you gave me, and I'm going to go ahead and speak for everyone and say that you gave us all something to think about as far as development and residential, and I look forward to questions later too. Next up, our next presenter is Todd Lang. He is the Senior Economic Development Associate with the International Development Corporation.
Hello, yes. Can you hear me?
Yes, sir. Thank you.
Perfect. Thank you so much for this opportunity. My name is Todd Lang. I'm with the International Economic Development Council. And we have just been working so well with the Houston-Galveston Area Council throughout the few years we've had on this work. So we really appreciate this opportunity as well. We see you as such great partners, and we hope that we're serving you and your communities well. I want to spend just a few minutes today to really offer assistance. The International Economic Development Council is, we are essentially the major trade association for economic developers. And our job is essentially to make the job of economic development professionals, the people that are on the phone, easier. We have about 5,000 members. And we do many different things in regards towards economic development. Some of you may be familiar with the conferences that we hold, the courses and the certification program that we offer, a lot of different webinars and journals, etc. But essentially, these are all things focused on making sure economic developers have the support and capacity needed to do your jobs well. You are all on the front lines of this work, and that's apparent obviously during this pandemic as you're dealing with so many challenges in your communities, and also balancing that with ever personal issues that are happening, because we're all impacted by this in many ways. But another thing we do, though, and what I want to talk about and essentially sell this free service to anyone interested, is that we have an economic recovery program. We have been working with communities in the world of disaster recovery since Hurricane Katrina. And as a membership organization, our strongest asset is our members. So what we do is essentially deploying volunteers to areas that are impacted by some sort of economic disaster or in some sort of economic recovery or resilience period. And it's essentially giving you a free consultant to work with you and your community. These folks are generally members or close friends of IEDC with at least 10 years of experience generally. And those folks would usually, the way that we run this program, would visit your community for about a week to work on economic development issues and challenges and projects and opportunities for you. And this is no cost to your organization. IEDC has a grant with the Economic Development Administration to roll out this program. So it's essentially, like I said, it's a consultant to work with you and added capacity and resources that will not be a line item on your budget at all. And we're proud to have worked with many different communities throughout Texas, and actually have worked with El Campo recently. And I was looking at the files two years ago this week. We were working with Wharton back in April of 2018. And this next map here just shows you a little bit of the work that we've done in the state of Texas since 2017. You'll see a lot of colorful dots there in the Houston-Galveston region. And again, we appreciate and thank H-GAC for connecting us to many of those folks. I know El Campo, for instance, we got connected with them through a similar type of meeting that we are having today, which was in person, of course. we are in interesting times, right? So when this program has, the way this program has existed is, like I said, we send volunteers to spend 3, 4, 5 days in your community, to travel, to meet with stakeholders, to see the area in person. That, of course, is essentially not possible now, and may not be for some time. There are areas where we can't go right now that have different type of stay in place situations, and then there's also, as some of those places start to open up, there may also be situations for our volunteers where they're not able or are looking to travel. But we're not shutting down this service. So what I want to talk to each of you today is about the notion of our remote assistance, and we've rolled this out in about a half dozen communities throughout Texas so far. I want to make sure that you're all available for it. We're kind of looking at these in 3 different areas. So mentoring sessions is something that we hope and expect people would be interested in. It takes a lot of work to host our folks for a week, and we know that economic developers are so busy right now. So we are offering these mentoring sessions, which are essentially 1-hour phone or Zoom calls or something like that, where you can just really get some advice and consultation from an economic development professional on areas that may be impacting your community. We know that you're all really busy, and sometimes just reaching out to somebody that has experience and a different perspective on a topic that you're interested in, we could roll these out fairly quickly. And these could even translate into multiple sessions, but we want to give the opportunity for kind of this quick tactical approach to give capacity to organizations when we know you're running around so much and doing many different things within the communities. We are also still offering our traditional technical assistance. So this is much more project-based, kind of in-depth technical assistance where you could receive up to 40 hours or so of consultation with a volunteer. Again, this economic development professional would be available to you through email, through telephone, through video conference. And can even meet with your stakeholders, virtually. And we want to make sure that folks are available for this and interested in this and open to this for some of those items in economic development that are a little bit more in depth that you would like to focus in. For instance, we're working with communities on some of their strategic planning processes virtually. We're actually doing a SWOT analysis for one community virtually, where we're arranging about 20 different phone conversations between the consultant and stakeholders. So these things are a little bit more, take a little bit more work than getting people on the ground there, but we're seeing that it certainly works. And we're also want to let you know that you will be hearing about essentially group sessions on specific economic development topics that we anticipate are popular right now, where we're looking to recruit perhaps 5, 6, or 7 communities to participate essentially in a webinar, and then those participants that are interested can then schedule tailored sessions with that person who conducted the webinar, and that would be much more of a tailored kind of one-on-one session to follow up on that major topic, but again, be very applicable and germane to what's going on within your community. And I just want to note there that I say may. This is will. We will be doing more in-person visits in the future. Obviously, time will tell on different travel capabilities, etc. But we do hope. Our hope is that for those communities that are receiving virtual remote assistance in the current time frame, that volunteer would then get to visit once it's possible in your community, and people feel that they are willing to travel. This is I mentioned that this is no cost. This is also a pretty low administrative lift. We want to get the assistance to you and not have you focusing on large lengthy applications. Essentially, you can call me at the phone number that I list there, or reach out by email at the email address. I know this will be available on the information that H-GAC sends. We also want to make sure that you see our website, iadconline.org. And also for those dealing with the pandemic, which is everyone, we are putting a lot of what we're hearing to be interesting and exciting and helpful resources on restoreyoureconomy.org. So those are some websites that I would recommend visiting to get some quick information on ways that can help. So, but I appreciate this opportunity to take some of your time today. We've worked with, as you may have seen, over 50 communities throughout Texas. We are very proud of the work that we do here on behalf of the state, and know that our members can really add, like I said, that different perspective and outsider's view, as well as expertise, and also while you're doing so many things to help the communities and people in those communities, add some capacity to the organization. So I encourage all of you to reach out, and I look forward to hearing from anyone who is interested. And again, thank you for this opportunity.
Hey, thank you. We have a few minutes left for questions, comments, or announcements. So if you have a question, please raise your hand by your name on the attendees list, and I'll try to unmute you, or you could type your questions in the question box. And while we wait, so we don't have to sit here quietly, I did get a comment from Carolyn Gibson in El Campo, and I'm just going to assume that this was for everyone. I can't imagine why it wouldn't be. And it says, I can't give IEDC and Todd and his team enough kudos for their assistance. We received an incredible strategic plan through this program, and if anyone needs a testimony, please give Carolyn a call. So does anyone else have any questions?
Now, this is Chad, though. I'll echo what Carolyn said. I mean, we've after Harvey, I think we had 3 or 4 teams come in and do different things, from teaching me how to use the synchronous or BRNE software to doing a planning for marketing opportunity zones. They were sure Johnny on the spot and do great work. And I'm looking forward to when life affords me the opportunity to do it for somebody else.
Okay, does anyone have any questions or announcements? Okay, that might be it for us, and we're going to be wrapping up. I want to thank you again for joining us today. Our next roundtable will be Tuesday, July 28th, so you can mark your calendar, but the exact time and location is going to be announced later on our website. Slides from today's presentations will be posted on H-GAC's website. You can go to h-gac.com/go/BBMS, which stands for Bringing Back Main Street, but you don't have to remember that. I'm going to send you a follow-up email after this. And when I do see that there is a question, it's do CDBG-DR funds have to comply with the Fair Housing Act?
Yes.
All right. Well, thank you again, and we will see you all if you join us in July.
Thank you.
Thanks, everyone. Take care.